The story begins in a small town called Redwood Falls, where Martha and Benjamin were living through a nightmare. Their son, Andrew, had gone missing 3 days ago. He had wandered into the woods, and no one had seen him since. The police didn't have any answers, and the whole town seemed quiet with worry. It was as if Andrew had disappeared into thin air. Then, something strange started happening. Every night, a fox appeared at their window. This wasn't a normal fox. Its eyes were bright and stared at them with an odd intensity, like it was trying to say something. At first, Martha and Benjamin were too afraid and confused to understand what was happening. But one night, the fox tapped its paws on the glass. That's when they couldn't ignore it anymore. "Maybe it's a sign," Martha whispered, her voice a mix of fear and hope. Benjamin stared at the fox, its eyes full of meaning. He agreed. This was something they had to follow. The next time the fox came, they decided they would go after it. Sure enough, on the 4th night, the fox came back. This time, its knocks on the window were urgent, almost desperate. Martha and Benjamin didn't say much. They just grabbed their coats and a flashlight. Their hearts raced as they stepped into the cold night, a mix of fear and hope in the air. The fox led them through familiar streets, but then it turned and disappeared into the dark woods at the edge of town. Martha and Benjamin followed, pushing through thick bushes and sharp branches. Their clothes got caught as they went deeper, but they didn't stop. After what felt like forever, they stumbled into a clearing. In the middle stood an old abandoned cabin. The fox paused, looking at the cabin for a moment before slipping into the trees. "Could Andrew be here?" Benjamin asked, his voice shaking as he stared at the cabin. Martha didn't answer. She quickly moved toward the cabin, her heart pounding. The old wood creaked as they stepped inside, the air thick with dust. The place was silent, but something caught Martha's eye. On a small table, there was a child's red cap, Andrew's cap. Tears filled her eyes as she picked it up. "He was here," she whispered, her voice shaky. It was the first real sign they had in days. Andrew was still out there. As they turned to leave, something else caught Benjamin's eye. On the wall was a photo of a group of people. One man in the picture looked almost exactly like Martha. "Who are these people?" Benjamin asked, his voice full of confusion. Martha stared at the photo, her heart pounding. "I don't know," she whispered, fear creeping into her voice. The man in the picture looked so much like her, it was impossible to ignore. They quickly left the cabin, marking the spot on their GPS, promising to return with the police the next day. But that night, sleep was impossible. All they could think about was the photo and the strange man who resembled Martha. The next morning, they came back with the police, but the search didn't bring any new answers. The photo of the man remained a mystery. Martha refused to give up. "We need to talk to the older folks in town," she said. "Someone has to know something about this cabin." Their first stop was Mr. Egret, the town historian. His house was filled with old books and dusty papers. When he saw the photograph, his face turned serious. "That cabin," he said quietly, flipping through an old ledger. "It used to belong to the Harrisons. It's been abandoned for years." "The Harrisons?" Martha and Benjamin exchanged puzzled looks as Mr. Egret continued. "The Harrisons were one of the founding families of Redwood Falls. They helped build this town from the ground up, but their cabin hasn't been touched in years." He pointed to a map on his wall. "This is where it is," he said. "You should check the town archives. There might be something helpful there." Martha and Benjamin thanked him and made their way to the town archives, a large, dusty building at the end of Main Street. They were determined to find out anything they could. When they entered, the clerk handed them stacks of old papers about the Harrisons. As they went through the papers, they began noticing strange things. Some dates didn't match up, and Benjamin found details that didn't seem right. Martha also spotted things that didn't fit with what they had been told. They made notes, hoping something would lead them to Andrew. Hours passed, and their hope began to fade. Just as they were starting to feel hopeless, Benjamin pointed to a large family tree chart. It was spread across the table, with names and dates of the Harrison family going back generations. As they studied it, Martha's eyes went wide. The man from the photograph was listed on the family tree. "That's him," Martha said, pointing at the name beside the faded photograph. Her voice trembled with shock. The man in the photo was the same one from the cabin. This was no coincidence. "This is incredible," Benjamin said, his mind racing. But there was more to uncover. Martha had found a letter, worn and brittle with age, that mentioned the cabin. The letter hinted at a secret meeting that had taken place there many years ago. What could that mean? Benjamin was holding something else now. It was an old land grant application, and Martha's great-grandfather's signature was on it. The document was dated around the same time as the earliest records of the Harrisons. Could this link their families? As they dug deeper, they found more connections. The Harrisons and Martha's family had been closely tied for generations. There were business deals, marriages, and land agreements that connected them in ways neither Martha nor Benjamin had ever imagined. The town's history seemed to be tied to their families in ways they hadn't expected. Benjamin spoke softly. "Do you think this has something to do with Andrew's disappearance?" Martha thought for a moment, then nodded. Maybe there's something about this land, or an old family feud we don't know about." They decided to return to the cabin. With everything they had learned, they felt this might be the moment they finally uncovered the truth. They gathered the maps, photographs, and documents, ready to search the woods again. When they reached the cabin, they felt certain they were on the right path. They studied the map closely, marking areas that seemed important. But as they went deeper into the forest, something strange happened. They got lost. "Are you sure this is the right way?" Martha asked, her voice full of worry. The woods seemed darker now, and they were beginning to feel the weight of their uncertainty. Just then, they heard a soft, rhythmic tapping. It was the same sound they had heard before, the fox's paws on the ground. It felt like the fox was calling them again. Martha and Benjamin stopped and listened. Sure enough, the fox appeared, its bright eyes locked on them. Without a word, it turned and started walking, as if urging them to follow. They had no choice but to trust the fox. They followed it deeper into the woods, unsure of what they might find. After what felt like hours, they came upon a moonlit clearing. Suddenly, a man emerged from the shadows, holding a weapon in his hand. "Who are you, and what are you doing here?" the man demanded, his voice stern. Martha, her heart racing, quickly held up a photo of Andrew. "Please, we're just looking for our son," she said, her voice trembling. The man's expression softened when he saw the photo and Andrew's red cap. "He's safe," he said calmly. "Come with me." The man explained he was a descendant of the Harrison family and led them through the woods to a small cabin. Inside, they were overwhelmed with relief to find Andrew, unharmed and surrounded by people who had taken care of him. Martha and Benjamin rushed to their son, hugging him tightly. Andrew smiled, his eyes shining. "I knew you'd come," he said softly. As they made their way back through the forest, Benjamin looked at Martha and said, "Our family story is tied to this town. We didn't just live here, we helped build it." Martha nodded, a peaceful feeling settling in her chest. They had found Andrew, and in doing so, uncovered a hidden part of their family's past. Together, they walked back into their new future, hearts full of love and hope. That's all for today. Now it's your turn to share your thoughts about this story. What's the next story you'd like to know? Let us know in the comment section below, and be sure to subscribe so you won't miss any of these amazing videos on The Wild Wonder.